Wido accepted a house on the cliff's edge as payment, but it held a secret. Sarah Mitchell held the baby in her arms, while the other 3 children huddled close to her side, all staring with a mixture of fear and hope at the wooden structure that balanced precariously on the edge of the rock. The merchant, Robert Harrison, had just handed over the keys, thus settling an old debt her late husband owed him. It was then that her eldest daughter, Emily, just 10 years old, tugged on the hem of her black widow's dress and whispered with wide eyes, "Mum, is that house going to fall off the cliff?" Sarah swallowed hard. She had been thinking the same thing, but she couldn't show weakness. Not now, when they finally had a roof over their heads after 2 weeks of sleeping in the town square of Stone Ridge, in the countryside of Colorado. "No, it won't, my dear. Mr. Robert said it's been there for over 50 years. But even she couldn't hide the tremor in her voice. The house seemed to defy the laws of physics, built exactly where the mountain ended and the abyss began. A wooden porch extended over the void, supported only by beams that looked too fragile to bear the weight. Daniel, 8 years old, pointed at the dark windows of the structure. "Why are all the curtains closed, Mum?" "It must be because no one has lived there for a long time." Emma Grace, 6 years old, hid behind her mother's skirt when a gust of wind made the entire house groan as if in pain. The baby Tommy, just 8 months old, began to cry as if sensing the danger in the air. Robert Harrison watched the family from a distance, leaning against his old truck. He was a man of about 60, with graying hair and a gaze that carried a weight Sarah couldn't decipher. The entire trip up there, he had been strangely quiet. "Mrs. Sarah," he called, approaching slowly. "Are you sure you want to stay? I could try to arrange another place in town." "With what money, mister?" "Robert," she replied, trying to sound stronger than she felt. "You said yourself I can't afford rent anywhere. It's just that—" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "This house has its peculiarities." "What kind of peculiarities?" Robert looked at the children and then back at Sarah. He seemed to be fighting an internal battle about what to say. "Nothing major. It's just... It gets very isolated up here. The road is difficult when it rains, and the wind..." As if on cue, a new gust swept across the mountain, making the house sway visibly. The children pressed even closer to Sarah. "Mom, I'm scared," murmured Emma Grace. Sarah took a deep breath. They had no choice. After her husband passed away 3 months ago, a victim of a fever the doctors couldn't explain, she lost her job at the factory because she needed to care for the children. The money ran out, the rent fell behind, and the landlord of the house they lived in didn't want to hear any sad stories. That's when Robert appeared with the proposal. He said her husband, James, owed money from an old partnership they had years ago, before the children were born. Instead of collecting the debt from the widow, he offered that house as settlement. "Let's go inside," said Sarah, more to herself than to the children. "We can't stay out here forever." Robert handed over the keys reluctantly. "If you need anything, my house is in town. It's the only one with a green gate on Cross Street." "Thank you, Mr. Robert, truly." The man waved at the children, who responded timidly. He got into the truck and sat for a few minutes, as if he wanted to say something more. Finally, he started the engine and drove down the mountain, leaving clouds of dust in the air. Sarah walked up to the front door. A solid piece of wood painted a faded blue. The key slid easily into the lock, as if it had been waiting for them. The door opened with a long creak that echoed through the dark interior of the house. The smell that hit them was strange. It wasn't mildew or dampness, as one would expect from an abandoned house. It was a clean smell, as if someone had recently scrubbed the floors. "What a strange smell," commented Emily, covering her nose. "It must be some product they used before closing up the house," lied Sarah, though she also found it odd. They entered slowly, their footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Sarah searched for the light switch and, to her surprise, the lights worked. The room revealed before them made her heart skip a beat. All the furniture was arranged exactly as she used to arrange it in her old home. The 2-seater sofa facing the window, the coffee table with a crocheted doily, the bookshelf with books organized by size. It was as if someone had photographed her old living room and recreated it here. "Mom," Emily tugged on her skirt again, Why is the furniture the same as in our old house? Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. It was a very strange coincidence, but she tried to rationalize it. It must be a coincidence, sweetie. Lots of people arrange their house like this. But inside, she knew that wasn't normal. Neither the exact position of the sofa nor the way the cushions were arranged could be a coincidence. Daniel ran to the window and shouted, frightened, "Mom, come see! You can see the bottom of the hole from here." Sarah carefully approached the window and looked down. The cliff dropped for hundreds of meters until it met a lush valley far below. The view was spectacular but terrifying. A fall from there would be fatal. "No one goes near this window without me around," she said firmly. "Daniel, did you hear me?" "Yes, Mom." Emma Grace was exploring the kitchen when she shouted excitedly, "Mom, there's food in the fridge." Sarah ran over. Indeed, the refrigerator was stocked with milk, eggs, bread, fruits, vegetables, everything fresh as if it had been bought that very day. "It must have been Mr. Robert," she murmured, though she didn't remember him mentioning anything about it. On the kitchen table were 4 plates and 4 glasses, as if someone had been expecting exactly them. Sarah felt that something was very wrong, but the children's hunger spoke louder. "Let's have lunch," she said. "We'll explore the rest of the house later." While preparing scrambled eggs, Sarah watched her children. Emily helped with the baby Tommy, Daniel played with some lead soldiers he found in a drawer, and Emma Grace hummed a song she had never heard before. "Emma Grace, what song is that?" The girl stopped humming and looked confused at her mother. "I don't know. It just came into my head." "What do you mean it came into your head?" "I can't explain. It's like someone sang it to me, but there's no one here." Sarah felt another shiver. First the furniture, then the food, now this. She was beginning to wonder if accepting that house had been a good idea. After lunch, she decided to explore the rest of the house. There were 3 bedrooms, a larger one that would be hers, and 2 smaller ones for the children. Again, the furniture was arranged in a way that was strangely familiar to her. In the main bedroom, she found an old wardrobe. When she opened it, she almost screamed. There were clothes hanging there, women's clothes in her exact size, dresses, blouses, skirts, all very similar to the style she used to wear before she was widowed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. In the girls' room, there was a single bed and a crib. In the wardrobe, children's clothes. Sarah picked up a little pink dress and her hand trembled. It was identical to one Emma Grace had worn last year, before it became too small for her. "This can't be," she whispered to herself. In the boys' room, the same thing. Boys' children's clothes that could have come from Daniel's own wardrobe. Sarah sat on the bed and tried to understand what was happening. All of that couldn't be a coincidence. Someone knew about her family. Someone had prepared that house specifically for them. "Mom!" shouted Emily from outside. "Come see what I found." Sarah ran to the backyard, where Emily was kneeling near a tree. The girl had found a small mound in the dirt, as if something were buried there. "There's something under here," said Emily. "Can I dig?" "Let's look for a shovel." They found gardening tools in a small shed in the back. Sarah began to dig at the spot Emily pointed out. She didn't need to go very deep. Soon her shovel hit something solid. It was a wooden chest, not very large but heavy. With effort, she managed to pull it from the earth. It was locked, but the key was stuck to the bottom with tape. "Open it, Mom," the children said in unison. Sarah hesitated. Part of her didn't want to know what was inside, but curiosity won. The chest was full of old children's clothes, but in perfect condition. And what chilled her was realizing they were clothes identical to what her daughters wore. Not similar. Identical. "Mom, this dress is just like mine," said Emma Grace, picking up a little yellow dress. "And this blouse is just like Emily's," added Daniel. Sarah rummaged through the chest looking for some explanation. At the bottom, she found an old black and white photograph. The image showed a family, a dark-haired woman with 4 children in front of the same house where they were now. The woman in the photo bore a strikingly close resemblance to Sarah herself, and the children. Daniel took the photo from her hands and widened his eyes. "Mum, these kids look just like us." It was true. The resemblance was eerie, not just in the number of children or their approximate ages, but in their features, in the way they were positioned in the photo. Sarah turned the photograph over. On the back was written in careful handwriting, "Rodriguez family, 1973. "Who are these people?" asked Emily. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know." That night, Sarah could barely sleep. The children seemed strangely comfortable in the house, as if they already knew it. Emma Grace kept humming that mysterious song. Daniel played with the toy soldiers as if they were his usual toys, and even Tommy slept better than he had in weeks. But for Sarah, every shadow in the house seemed to hide a secret. Every creak of the wood sounded like a warning. The next day, she decided to go down to town to talk to Robert. She needed answers. She left the children playing in the backyard, well away from the edge of the cliff, and walked down the mountain on foot. The walk was steep and tiring, but she needed to understand what was happening. She found the house with the green gate on Cross Street without difficulty. It was a simple but well-kept building. Robert received her on the porch, not seeming very surprised by her visit. "How was the first night, Mrs. Sarah?" "Mr. Robert, I need to ask some questions about that house." His expression changed immediately. The man grew tense, avoiding her gaze. "What kind of questions?" "Why is the furniture arranged exactly as I arranged it in my old house? Why was there fresh food in the refrigerator? And these clothes in the wardrobe?" Robert got up from the chair where he was sitting and began to pace back and forth on the porch. "You're imagining things. I am not. And we found a chest buried in the backyard with clothes identical to my daughter's and a photo of a family that looks very much like ours." The man stopped walking and looked directly at her. His eyes were filled with a deep sadness. "Mrs. Sarah, some things are better left as they are." "No, I want to know the truth. What haven't you told me about that house?" Robert sighed heavily and sat down again. "The house had other occupants before, a family with 4 children just like yours." "And what happened to them?" "They left one night, left everything behind and never came back." "Why did they leave?" "I don't know. No one knows. They simply vanished." Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. That wasn't the answer she expected to hear. "Mr. Robert, you're hiding something from me. I can feel it." The man was silent for a long time, as if deciding how much of the truth he could tell. "Mrs. Sarah, that family was my brother's family." The revelation hit like a bolt of lightning. Sarah felt her legs go weak. "Your brother?" "Benjamin Harrison. He died 5 years ago. His wife, Mrs. Margaret, was left a widow with the 4 children, just like you." "And where are they now?" "They went to New York. Margaret got a job there and took the children. But before she left, she asked me to keep some of their things in the house. The clothes, the toys, the photos." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but there were still many unanswered questions. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I knew you'd find it strange. And because—" He hesitated again. "Because what?" "Because when I saw your situation, it reminded me so much of Margaret's situation. 2 widows, 4 children each, with nowhere to live. I thought it might be a sign." "A sign?" "That I could help someone in the same situation she was in, as a way to make up for not helping more back then." Sarah was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. Robert felt guilty for not helping his brother and sister-in-law more, and now he was trying to make up for it by helping another family in a similar situation. "But that doesn't explain why the furniture is arranged exactly as I used to arrange it." Robert blushed slightly. I visited your house a few times when your husband was alive to discuss business. And when I went to arrange the house for you, I tried to make it look similar to what I remembered from your home." "And the food in the refrigerator?" "I bought it before handing over the keys. I thought you and the children would be hungry." The explanations were reasonable, but Sarah still felt she wasn't hearing the whole truth. "Mr. Robert, why do I have the feeling you still haven't told me everything?" The man sighed once more and looked at the sky, as if searching for courage up there. "Because my brother wasn't just your husband's business partner, Mrs. Sarah. They were partners in something that didn't go very well." "What kind of thing?" They had a small goods transportation business, nothing illegal, understand clearly. But some shipments got lost, other clients didn't pay. The business went under and left a lot of debt. Debt to whom? To suppliers, to the bank, to me. I lent them money to try and save the business. When everything fell apart, my brother blamed himself. I think that's what affected his health. The story was becoming clearer and sadder at the same time. Sarah began to understand that both her husband and Robert's brother had carried an enormous burden before they passed. So when you offered the house as payment for the debt, it was a way to help you without it seeming like charity, and also a way to put that house to good use, as it was empty and only bringing me bad memories. Sarah fell silent, processing everything she had heard. The situation was complex, but it was starting to make sense. Robert was a man burdened with guilt who was trying to do good in the way he could. May I ask you something, Mr. Robert? Of course. Are you in contact with this Margaret, your brother's widow? I am. She writes to me from time to time. Why? I would like to speak with her. I think it would be important to better understand the situation. Robert thought for a moment. I can ask if she's willing to speak with you, but why is this important? Because if she went through the same situation I'm going through, perhaps she could give me some advice. And also because... Sarah hesitated but decided to be honest. Because I found it very strange that my daughter's clothes are so similar to the ones that were in the trunk. Oh, that. Margaret always had good taste in choosing the girls' clothes. Perhaps you have similar taste. The explanation made sense, but Sarah still felt there was something more. She decided not to press the matter for now. Whenever you can speak with her, I would be very grateful. I'll send a letter this very week. Sarah thanked him and began to say goodbye, but Robert called her before she left. Mrs. Sarah, may I give you some advice? Of course. Don't torment yourself with these coincidences. Sometimes life puts people in similar situations, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be an opportunity to learn from someone who has already been through what you are going through. You're right. And if the house doesn't suit you, if you feel uncomfortable there, come find me, and we can talk about other options. Thank you, Mr. Robert, truly. On the walk back to the house, Sarah reflected on the conversation. Robert's explanations were plausible, but she still had the feeling there were layers to the story he hadn't revealed. When she got home, she found the children playing happily in the backyard. Daniel had built a fortress with his toy soldiers. Emma Grace was combing a doll she had found somewhere in the house, and Emily was taking care of Tommy with the affection of a second mother. Mom! Emma Grace ran to hug her. Look at this beautiful doll I found. Sarah looked at the doll and once again felt that familiar chill. It was an old doll, but well preserved, with brown hair and blue eyes, and it was wearing a little dress that was identical to one Emma Grace owned. Where did you find this doll? It was under the bed in the girls' room. Can I keep it? Sarah watched her daughter happily playing with the doll. The children seemed more relaxed and content than they had been in weeks. Perhaps it was better not to spoil this moment of peace with her worries. Yes, you may, my dear. That night, while putting the children to bed, Sarah noticed they seemed to know the house better than would be possible after just one day. Daniel knew exactly where the toys were in the room. Emma Grace found a little brush for the doll in a specific drawer, and even Emily seemed to know instinctively where things were. Emily, Sarah called while arranging Tommy's crib. How did you know there were diapers in that drawer? I don't know, Mom. It was just a guess. But it was a very accurate guess. It's like I already knew it was there. Strange, isn't it? It was strange indeed. But Sarah decided not to ask any more questions that night. The children were happy and safe, and for now that was the most important thing. The next morning, she was awakened by a noise coming from the backyard. She looked out the window and saw an elderly man working in the garden. She dressed quickly and went out to see who it was. "Excuse me," she called. "Who are you?" The man turned around. He was thin, with white hair, and had a kind smile on his face. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm George Thompson. I took care of the garden of this house for Mr. Robert. I came to see if anything was needed." "Oh, how kind. But Mr. Robert didn't say anything to me about this. He must have forgotten. I've been coming here once a week for years." "It's just that this house—" He stopped speaking and looked thoughtfully at the structure. "What about this house?" "Nothing major. It's just that it needs special care because of the location. The wind-up here is very strong. It can damage the structure if we're not careful." Sarah looked at the house with renewed concern. "So it really is dangerous?" No, not dangerous. It just needs regular maintenance. That's why I always come to check on it." The gardener, who appeared to be about 70 years old, continued working the soil as he spoke. "You have 4 children, don't you?" "I do." "How do you know?" "Robert told me. Said it was just like the other family that lived here." "You knew that family?" James stopped digging and looked directly at her. "Knew them well. Benjamin was my friend. And Mrs. Margaret too. They were good people who went through hard times." "What did you think when they left?" "I thought it was sad, but I understood their decision. Sometimes people need to start over somewhere else." "Did they say why they were leaving?" James hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "Margaret said she wanted to give her children a better future. New York had more opportunities." "But did they like living here?" "Margaret liked it very much. She always said the view from here was the most beautiful in the world. But after Benjamin passed, I think the house became too heavy for her." Sarah understood the feeling. Sometimes places hold memories that can be both comforting and painful. "Mr. James, can I ask something a bit strange?" "Of course, ma'am." "The daughters of that family, did they dress similarly to my daughters?" The gardener smiled. "Margaret always had a taste similar to yours for dressing the girls. Simple clothes, but pretty and well kept. Why do you ask?" "It's just that we found a trunk with clothes very similar to my daughters." "Ah, yes, she left some things here. Said that maybe one day she'd come back for them, or if another family with children showed up, they could make use of them." Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Sarah was starting to feel more at ease about the strange coincidences. "And the toys? My children are playing with some toy soldiers and a doll. Those were left here too. Margaret's boys loved those toy soldiers, and the doll belonged to the youngest, Olivia." "Olivia?" "Yes, a beautiful girl about the same age as your Emma Grace." Sarah felt a pang of curiosity about this family that had lived her same situation in the same house. "Mr. James, do you think it would be possible for me to talk to Mrs. Margaret? By letter, perhaps. She sent her new address to Robert when she arrived in New York. Do you think she would be upset if I wrote to her?" "On the contrary, I think she'd be pleased. Margaret was always very sociable, and I'm sure she'd be happy to know another family is taking care of the house she liked so much." That afternoon, while the children played, Sarah decided to write a letter to Margaret. She didn't quite know what to say, but she felt the contact would be important. "Dear Mrs. Margaret, my name is Sarah Mitchell, and I am living in the house where you lived before, on the mountain top in Stonebridge. Mr. Robert offered me the house as payment for a debt my late husband had with him. I know it might seem strange for a stranger to write to you, but our situation is very similar to the one you lived through. I am also a widow and have 4 small children. I found some of your things in the house and would very much like to be able to talk to someone who went through the same situation I am going through. If you are willing and able, I would be very grateful if you could write back to me. I have many doubts about how to raise 4 children alone, and perhaps you could give me some advice. With admiration, Sarah Mitchell." She handed the letter to Robert to send, along with the address that George had provided. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out. Now continuing. The weeks that followed were calmer. The children adapted perfectly to the new house. Daniel staged epic battles with his toy soldiers in the backyard. Emma Grace cared for the doll Olivia as if it were a real daughter, and Emily helped Sarah with the care of the house and the baby Tommy. Sarah established a routine. Every morning she went down to town to buy groceries and collect the mail. George would appear twice a week to tend the garden and check the structure of the house. Robert would stop by from time to see if everything was all right. It was on a Thursday that Margaret's reply arrived. Sarah almost ran up the hill to read the letter in private. Dear Sarah, what a wonderful surprise to receive your letter. I was very moved to learn that a family is living in our old house. I always had a special fondness for that place. You are right when you say our situations are similar. I also was widowed young with 4 children to raise. I know well how difficult and frightening it is at first, but I can assure you it gets easier with time. I would love to talk with you. In fact, I've been missing Stonebridge and I'm thinking of taking a little trip there next month. Do you think we could meet? The boys are also eager to see the house where they grew up again. Regarding the toys and clothes you must have found, please feel free to use them. I left everything there thinking it might be useful to another family. It's as if the house chose you. I eagerly await your reply. Warmly, Margaret Harrison. Sarah was overjoyed by the letter. Finally, she would have the chance to talk with someone who understood her situation exactly. She wrote back immediately, inviting Margaret and her children to stay at the house when they came to visit. The following week, she told the children about the visit they would receive. "You're going to meet a family that lived here before us," she said during dinner. "They have 4 children, just like us." "That's so cool," exclaimed Daniel. "I can show them the battles I invented with the toy soldiers. And I'll introduce Olivia to her former owner," said Emma Grace, hugging the doll. "What are their names, Mom?" asked Emily. "The mother's name is Margaret. The children are Christopher, Matthew, Olivia, and the baby Benjamin." Emma Grace's eyes widened. "Olivia? Like the doll's name?" "Yes, the doll was hers." "Then I'll get to meet the girl who played with Olivia before me." The children's excitement was contagious. Sarah was also eager for the meeting. Margaret arrived on a Saturday afternoon. She was driving an old but well-kept car with her 4 children squeezed into the back seat. When she got out of the car, Sarah was shocked. The physical resemblance between them was striking. Margaret was also brunette, of average height, with long brown hair. And her children, although slightly older than Sarah's, bore a notable resemblance to her own kids. "Sarah," Margaret approached with a warm smile. "What an incredible coincidence. You look so much like me when I was your age." They hugged like old friends. Margaret's children watched shyly but curiously. "Christopher, Matthew, Olivia, Benjamin," Margaret called the children. "Come meet Mrs. Sarah and her children." Introductions were made, and within minutes the children were playing together, as if they had known each other for a long time. Christopher, 13 years old, taught Daniel new strategies for the toy soldiers. Matthew, 11, helped Emily organize some books he had found in the house. Olivia, now 9 years old, was moved to find her old doll in Emma Grace's hands. "You can keep it," Olivia said to Emma Grace. "I'm too big for dolls now, but take good care of her, okay?" "I will," promised Emma Grace. While the children played, Sarah and Margaret talked on the porch. The view of the cliff didn't seem to bother Margaret. On the contrary, she looked down at the valley with a nostalgic fondness. "I really missed this view," said Margaret. "In New York, all I see are buildings everywhere." "How was the move?" asked Sarah. "Hard at first. The children cried a lot about leaving the house. I cried too. But it was the right decision. I got a job at a textile factory, the boys got into a good school, and now we're doing well." "And what was it like living here after your husband passed?" Margaret sighed. "The first few months were terrible. Benjamin had been sick for a while, but we didn't know it was so serious. When he passed, I felt completely lost. This house felt too big and too empty for us. But you seem to like living here." "We loved it. Benjamin built this house when we got married. He said he wanted a place where we could see the whole world from our window. And really, from this porch you can see for miles and miles." Sarah looked at the house with new eyes. Benjamin had built that house with love, like a nest for his family. "Why did you decide to leave?" Margaret was thoughtful for a moment. "It was several things. The loneliness, the financial difficulties, the lack of opportunities for the children here on the mountain. But mainly—" She hesitated. "Mainly what?" "Mainly because I was starting to go crazy from so much isolation. Just imagine, a young widow with 4 small children living alone on top of a mountain. There were days I didn't speak to another adult." Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. That was exactly what she had been feeling some nights. "And how did you get past it?" "By deciding I needed people around. That's why I chose New York. There's always activity there, always someone to talk to. The children have friends." "Do you regret having come here?" "No, I don't regret it. It was good for the family while it lasted. Benjamin was very happy here. The children grew up free and healthy, but after he passed, it didn't make sense to stay anymore. Sarah understood. Each person had their own needs, and what worked for one family might not work for another. "And you?" asked Margaret. "How are you feeling here?" "It's strange. Sometimes I feel at peace, as if this really is our place. Other times I feel lost and isolated, like you described." "It's normal to feel that. The loneliness of widowhood is heavy, and living in an isolated place can intensify that feeling. But the children seem to really like it here. Mine did too. Children adapt more easily than adults. The question is, are you happy here?" It was a difficult question to answer. Sarah was grateful to have a roof over her head, relieved to be safe, but she didn't know if she could say she was happy. "I'm still figuring that out." During dinner, the two families shared stories and laughter. It was impressive how quickly the children had bonded. They seemed like cousins reuniting after a long time apart. "Aunt Sarah," said Olivia during dessert, "did you know there's a basement in this house?" "A basement?" Sarah looked surprised at Margaret. "Yeah, there's a little staircase hidden in the kitchen pantry," explained Christopher. "We used to play down there when we were little." "I've never seen any stairs in the pantry." "You have to move some crates that are in front of it," said Matthew. "Want us to show you?" Sarah looked at Margaret, who smiled. "You can show her. There's nothing strange down there. It's just an extra space Benjamin made when he built the house." After dinner, the children took Sarah to the pantry. Indeed, moving some old crates, there was a small door she had never noticed. Behind the door, a small wooden staircase descended to a tiny cellar. "Let me get a flashlight," said Emily. With the flashlight's light, they went down to the cellar. It was a small but cozy space. The walls were made of stone and there were some built-in shelves. "We used to play house here," explained Olivia. "Mom let us come down when it rained and we couldn't play in the yard." Sarah observed the space. It could be an interesting place for the children to play on bad weather days, but when the flashlight beam illuminated one of the walls, she saw something that made her stop. "What are these drawings on the wall?" Margaret, who had come down behind them, looked where Sarah was pointing. "Oh, that the children used to draw on the wall. Benjamin allowed it, said the house was theirs too, and they could decorate it however they wanted." There were dozens of children's drawings on the stone wall. Houses, sun, little stick figures, animals, flowers. It was like a children's art gallery. "Look!" Emma Grace pointed to one of the drawings. "This drawing looks like our family." Indeed, there was a drawing showing a woman and 4 small children. Sarah looked more closely and noticed there were several similar drawings on the wall. "The children always drew the family," explained Margaret. "It was their favorite subject." "And this drawing of the house?" Daniel pointed to another drawing. "Our house." They drew it from many different angles. Sarah observed the drawings with fascination. It was like seeing the history of that family recorded by children's hands. There were simpler drawings, clearly made when the children were very young, and others more elaborate. "Can I let my children draw here too?" asked Sarah. "Of course," replied Margaret. "The house is yours now. It's part of its history." That night, after everyone was asleep, Sarah and Margaret stayed talking on the porch. The full moon illuminated the valley below, creating an almost magical landscape. "Margaret, can I ask a personal question?" "Of course. How did you manage to overcome the loss of Benjamin, and on top of that, raise 4 children alone?" Margaret was silent for a moment, looking at the starry sky. "At first I thought I wouldn't make it. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, and mornings I didn't want to get out of bed. But the children needed me, and that forced me to keep going." "And the longing? Does it go away?" "It changes. At first it was a physical pain, as if a piece of me had been torn out. Then it turned into a gentler presence. Nowadays I feel Benjamin present in the boys' personalities, in the things they do that remind me of their father. Sometimes I feel I'm not strong enough for this. We all feel that, but we find the strength along the way, day after day. And you're not alone. You have Robert, you have Mr. George, you have the neighbors in town, and now you have me too. Would you come back to live here?" Margaret looked at the house and then at the valley. "No. My life is in New York now, but I'm happy to know there's a family taking care of this place that was so important to us." And if I decide to leave too? Then you'll leave and there won't be any problem. The important thing is for you to do what's best for you and your children. The conversation was interrupted by a noise coming from inside the house. It was Emma Grace crying. Sarah ran to see what was happening. "What's wrong, my dear?" "I had a nightmare," Emma Grace sobbed. "I dreamed the house fell off the cliff with everyone inside." Sarah hugged her daughter, trying to calm her. "It was just a nightmare, my love. This house has been here for 50 years and has never fallen down. But what if it does? It won't. Mr. George always comes here to check if the structure is okay." Margaret appeared at the bedroom door. "Emma Grace, when I lived here, my Olivia also had that same nightmare sometimes." "She did?" "Yes, she did. The house makes some strange noises because of the wind, and it's scary at first, but you'll see that after a while you won't even notice it anymore." "Olivia doesn't have that nightmare anymore?" "No, she doesn't. In New York she sleeps like an angel." Emma Grace seemed to calm down with the explanation. Sarah put her back to bed and stayed by her side until she was sure she had fallen asleep. On Sunday morning, it was time for Margaret and her children to return to New York. The farewell was emotional. The children had formed a genuine friendship in just 2 days. "Can I write a letter to Olivia?" asked Emma Grace. "Yes, you can," replied Margaret. "And you can come visit us in New York, too." "Mom, can we?" the children asked in chorus. "Of course we can," said Sarah. Before leaving, Margaret had a private conversation with Sarah. "Sarah, I want to give you some advice. If you decide to stay here, try not to isolate yourself. Go down to the town regularly, participate in community life, make friends. Loneliness is the greatest danger for a young widow." "I'll try." "And if you decide to leave, don't feel guilty. Everyone has their own needs and there's nothing wrong with recognizing that a place isn't right for you." "Thank you, Margaret, for everything. I'm the one who should thank you for taking care of our old house. I left here much more at ease knowing it's in good hands." After Margaret left, the house felt strangely quiet. The children were somewhat melancholy for a few days, missing their new friends. "When are we going to visit them in New York?" asked Daniel. "Maybe during the school holidays," replied Sarah, "but the holidays are 4 months away. It will pass quickly, you'll see." In truth, Sarah wasn't sure they would have the money for a trip to New York. The money left by her husband was running out, and she needed to find a way to support the family. It was while talking with James during one of his visits that she had an idea. "Mr. George, do you think I could sell something from around here to earn some money?" "What kind of thing?" "I don't know. Some crafts, food, something that people in town would like to buy?" The gardener thought for a moment. "Do you know how to cook?" "Yes, I do." "How about making sweets to sell at the town market?" Mrs. Christine, who used to sell sweets, stopped because she moved to the capital. People have been missing them. "Do you think it would work?" "I think so. People here really like homemade sweets, and you seem to have a knack for cooking." Sarah liked the idea. She could make sweets at home while taking care of the children and go down to town once or twice a week to sell. "What kind of sweets do you think would sell best?" "Brigadeiros, beijinhos, olho de sogra, those things everyone likes. And quindim, if you know how to make it. People here love quindim." Sarah knew how to make quindim. It was a recipe she learned from her mother. "I'll try. Thank you for the suggestion." The following week, she ran a test. She prepared a batch of brigadeiros, beijinhos, and quindins and took them to sell in the town square on a Thursday afternoon. To her surprise, she sold everything in less than 2 hours. People praised the sweets a lot and asked when she would be back with more. "Every Thursday and Saturday," replied Sarah, excited by the success. Starting that week, she established a new routine. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, she made the sweets, and on Thursday and Saturday afternoons, she went down to sell them in town. The children helped her, each with a task. Emily helped wrap the candies, Daniel carried the baskets, and Emma Grace entertained Tommy while Sarah worked. The business grew quickly. Soon, Sarah needed to increase production to meet the demand. Some merchants in town began placing orders for parties and events. "Mum, are we getting rich?" asked Emma Grace after an especially good afternoon of sales. "Not rich, my dear, but we are managing to pay our bills." "And will we be able to go to New York to visit Olivia?" "If we keep this up, I think so. The prospect of being able to visit their friends in New York motivated the children even more to help with the candy business. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. It was on a Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after the business began, that something unexpected happened. Sarah was in the square selling her candies when an elegant woman approached the stall. "Are you Sarah Mitchell?" asked the woman. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" "My name is Elizabeth Rodriguez. I need to speak with you about an important matter." The surname Rodriguez made Sarah remember the photo she had found in the trunk. Rodriguez family, 1973. "Are you related to the Rodriguez family that lived in my house in the 70s? The woman seemed surprised. "Yes, I am. They were my parents and my siblings. How do you know about that family?" Sarah felt her heart race. She finally had the chance to learn more about the mysterious family in the photo. "I found a photo of you all in a trunk buried in the backyard. Why don't you tell me a little about it? I'm very curious." Elizabeth looked around the busy square. "This isn't a conversation to have here. Could you receive me at your house someday?" "Of course, how about Sunday afternoon?" "Perfect, and you didn't just find the photo in the trunk, did you?" "I found clothes too, children's clothes." Elizabeth sighed deeply. "That's what I thought. I really need to talk to you about this." On Sunday, Elizabeth went up the mountain in a red pickup truck. She was a woman of about 45, well-dressed, and clearly had prospered in life, but her face carried an expression of worry. Sarah received her on the porch while the children played in the backyard. "This house," Elizabeth looked at the building with emotion, "has hardly changed." "You lived here?" "I did. From when I was 6 until I was 12. They were the best years of my childhood." "And why did you leave?" Elizabeth sat in one of the porch chairs and was silent for a moment, as if gathering the courage to speak. "My parents lost the house in a bet." "In a bet?" "My father was addicted to gambling. He bet on cockfights, card games, anything. One night he bet the deed to this house in a poker game and lost." Sarah was shocked. This was a twist she hadn't expected. "And to whom did he lose it?" "To Robert Harrison." The revelation hit like a thunderbolt. Robert had never mentioned anything about winning the house in a bet. He had said he bought it from Sarah's in-laws, but apparently that wasn't the whole truth. "Robert won this house from your father?" "He did. My family had to leave overnight. We couldn't take almost anything. That's why we buried some things in the backyard, hoping to one day come back for them." "But why did you never come back?" "My father was so ashamed of what he had done that he never wanted to set foot in Stonebridge again. We moved to another state and never returned until now." "And why have you come back now?" Elizabeth hesitated as if she didn't quite know how to explain. "Because I heard that Robert gave the house to a widow with 4 children. And that reminded me of the promise I made to my mother before she died." "What promise?" "She made me promise that one day I would come back here to retrieve some things that were very important to her. Things that were in that trunk you found." Sarah understood the situation was more complex than she had imagined. Elizabeth wasn't there just out of nostalgia. She wanted to recover something specific. "What exactly did your mother want you to retrieve?" "A gold wedding band that belonged to my grandmother. It was in a small wooden box inside the trunk. For my mother, it was the only memento of her family." Sarah remembered the trunk. There had indeed been a small box at the bottom that she hadn't opened, respecting the privacy of whoever had left those things there. "I'll fetch the box for you." "You don't mind?" "Of course not. The things are rightfully yours." Sarah brought the small wooden box that was stored in the bedroom. Elizabeth opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a simple but beautiful gold wedding band and some yellowed papers. "This is it," whispered Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes. "Grandma's ring. You may take it, and the papers too." "Thank you. You have no idea how much this means to me." Elizabeth carefully placed the ring in a small pouch and looked at the papers. "My goodness," she murmured. "What is it?" "They are letters my grandmother wrote to my mother. I didn't even know they existed." Sarah watched as Elizabeth read the letters with emotion. It was clear that this reconnection with the past was very important to her. "Elizabeth, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you know the story of the family that lived here after you? The Harrisons?" "I know Robert lived here with his brother for a while, but then the brother died and the sister-in-law left with the children." "And did you know that Robert offered me this house to settle a debt?" Elizabeth looked at Sarah with a strange expression. "What kind of debt?" "A business partnership my late husband had with him." Elizabeth seemed thoughtful. "That's interesting." "Why interesting?" "Because Robert has a habit of feeling guilty for the bad things that happen to the people around him." "How so?" "When my father lost the house to him, Robert felt terrible. He knew my father was a gambling addict, but he accepted the bet anyway. Afterwards, he kept blaming himself for destroying a family." The pieces of another puzzle began to form in Sarah's mind. "Do you think he offered me the house out of guilt, and not because of the debt?" "I think it might be a mixture of both. Robert has always been a good man, but he carries a lot of weight on his conscience." "And what do you think I should do?" "It depends on how you feel living here. The house is yours now, regardless of Robert's motivations. The important thing is, are you happy here?" It was a difficult question to answer. The children seemed happy, the candy business was doing well, and they had stability for the first time in months. But Sarah still felt there were layers to the story she didn't know. "May I ask one more question, Elizabeth?" "Of course." "Why do you think Robert offers this house specifically to families with 4 children and a widowed mother?" Elizabeth thought for a moment. "Because our family's situation when we lost the house was exactly that. My mother was widowed just a few months after we lost the house. My father became so depressed he fell ill and passed away. Robert always blamed himself for that." "So he's trying to fix what happened to your family through our family and Margaret's family?" "It's possible. That would be very much like Robert's way of thinking." Sarah reflected on this. On one hand, it was unsettling to discover she had been chosen to satisfy someone else's heavy conscience. On the other hand, the practical result was that her family had a home and a new chance at life. "Elizabeth, may I ask where you live now?" "In Denver. I have a clothing store there." "I got married, had 2 children. Life has been good to me." "And did you never want to come back to this house?" "I always did, but I never had the courage to look for Robert. I was too proud to admit I wanted some things back." "And now?" "Now I am at peace. I recovered what was important to my mother. I saw the house is being well cared for by a family that needs it. It's all I could want." Elizabeth said goodbye in the late afternoon, promising to come visit when she could. Before leaving, she made a suggestion that left Sarah thoughtful. "Sarah, if one day you want to know the whole truth about how you came to this house, talk directly to Robert. He is an honest man. He just needs a little nudge to tell things as they really are." That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah stayed on the porch thinking about everything she had discovered. The story of the house was much more complex than she had imagined. Robert had won the property in a bet, felt guilty about it, lent it to his brother to live in, and was now offering it to families in vulnerable situations as a form of redemption. But did that change anything? They still needed a place to live. The house was still safe and cozy. The candy business was still doing well. The children were still happy. The next morning, she decided to pay a visit to Robert. She needed to clarify a few things, but wasn't quite sure how to approach the subject. She found him tending to his own house's garden, as he always did on Monday mornings. "Good morning, Mr. Robert." "Good morning, Mrs. Sarah. How are things up there?" "They're fine. Actually, I came here because I wanted to talk about some things." Robert's expression changed immediately. He seemed to know the conversation would be serious. "What would you like to know?" "The truth about how you got that house." Robert sighed and placed the gardening tool on the ground. "Did you talk to someone?" "I talked to Elizabeth Rodriguez, daughter of the man who lost the house to you in a bet." "Ah." Robert sat down on a garden bench. "I imagined that one day someone from the Rodriguez family would show up. Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" "Because I was ashamed and because I didn't want you to refuse the house thinking it was charity." "So it was charity." "In part, yes. But it was also a way of doing something good with a property that only brought me bad memories. Sarah sat down beside him on the bench. "Mr. Robert, I'm not angry with you. I just want to understand the whole story." "You have every right to know. What exactly do you want me to tell you?" "Everything, from the beginning." Robert took a deep breath and began to tell the full story. "It all started about 30 years ago. I used to play cards with some friends, nothing too serious. One day, Richard Rodriguez showed up in the group. He was an honest, hard-working man, but he had this problem with gambling. And you knew that?" "I did. We all did. But we didn't imagine he would bet something as important as the family home." "What happened that night?" "It was a game that lasted until dawn. Richard was losing a lot of money he didn't have. Then he offered the house deed as collateral for one last play." "And you accepted?" "I tried to dissuade him. Said it wasn't a good idea, but he insisted, said he was sure he would win, and the other players were pressuring to accept. And he lost. He lost. When he realized what he had done, he broke down crying. I offered to return the deed in exchange for the money he owed, but he said he couldn't pay. And then the family had to leave the house. Benjamin became so depressed that he fell ill and died a few months later. The widow left with the children, and I was left with a property that reminded me every day of how a family was destroyed because of one night of gambling." "So that's why you offered the house to your brother?" "I did. I thought if someone from my family lived there, maybe the bad memories would be replaced by good ones." "And were they?" "For a while, yes. Benjamin and Margaret were happy there. The children grew up well. But when my brother died and Margaret left, the house was empty again." "And then you thought of offering it to me?" "When I learned of your situation, I immediately remembered the situation of the Rodriguez family. And Margaret too. Young widows with 4 children, with no place to live. I thought it might be a way to do something good with that house. And my husband's debt? Was it real?" Robert hesitated for a moment. "It was real, yes. Your husband and my brother were partners in that transport business. When everything went wrong, there was debt left, but..." He stopped talking. "But what?" "But the debt wasn't that big. It wouldn't justify an entire house." "So you really gave me the house?" "Yes. But I preferred to present it as debt settlement so you wouldn't feel embarrassed." Sarah fell silent, processing everything she had heard. On one hand, discovering that Robert had basically given her a house was frightening. On the other hand, his honesty in telling the truth was comforting. "Mr. Robert, what do you expect from me in return for this?" "Nothing. Only that you and the children be happy in that house, that it finally becomes a real home for someone." "And if I decide to leave?" "The house is yours, Mrs. Sarah. You can do whatever you want with it. Sell it, rent it, donate it, whatever. I just don't want it to be empty again." "You don't regret giving me the house?" "On the contrary, seeing how happy your children are there, how you set up the candy business, how the house is full of life again. It's the first time in 30 years that I feel at peace with that property." Sarah understood that Robert was genuinely a good man trying to fix the mistakes of the past, and the practical result was that her family had benefited from it. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Robert. You're not upset with me?" "No, I'm grateful. But next time tell the truth from the start, okay?" "Okay." Sarah returned home with her mind more at ease. She finally knew the whole story of the property where she lived. It was a sad story, but one that was having a happy ending. In the following months, the family's life stabilized. The candy business grew so much that Sarah needed to hire a neighbor to help her. The children adapted completely to life in the mountains. Emma Grace stopped having nightmares about the house falling off the cliff. Daniel became an expert in tin soldiers and taught military strategy to any child who came to visit. Emily became a second mother to Tommy and a great help to Sarah in everything. The house that once seemed full of mysteries was now simply a home. The basement became the children's favorite spot on rainy days, the walls filled with new drawings mixed with the old ones from the Harrison family. The porch became the place where Sarah planned her recipes and watched the sunset over the valley. It was during one of these afternoons on the porch that she received a letter from Margaret. "Dear Sarah, How are things over there? Here in New York we are all well. The boys won't stop talking about the visit we made to the house and how much they liked your children. I have some news to tell you. I got a better job at the factory and now I'll be working in the office, no longer in production. The pay is better and the schedule is more flexible. With this change, I'm thinking about fulfilling an old dream. I've always wanted to have my own small business. And I remembered your wonderful sweets. What about we form a partnership? I could sell your sweets here in New York. There are many people from our region living here who would feel nostalgic tasting homemade sweets like yours. And New York is a huge market. There would definitely be demand. If you agree, we could start small. You would send 1 or 2 boxes per week, and I would sell them to acquaintances and co-workers. As demand grew, we could expand. What do you think of the idea? It would be a way to connect our families not just through friendship but also through a business. I eagerly await your reply. With affection, Margaret. Sarah was excited by the proposal. Expanding the business to New York would be an incredible opportunity, but it would also be a big challenge. She would have to greatly increase production and figure out a way to send the sweets without them spoiling. "What do you all think?" she asked the children during dinner. "I think we should try," said Emily. "Mrs. Margaret is our friend and knows our sweets well. And if it works, we'll be able to visit them more often," added Daniel. "And Olivia will get to taste my coconut candies," said Emma Grace. Even Tommy, who was now 1 year old and starting to say his first words, clapped his little hands when he heard the name Olivia. "Then it's decided. We'll accept the partnership with Mrs. Margaret." Sarah wrote back accepting the proposal. In the following weeks, they worked together to organize the business logistics. Margaret found a shipping company that made the trip between Stonebridge and New York twice a week. Sarah developed special packaging that would keep the sweets fresh during the journey. The business started small as planned, but in a short time the demand in New York grew exponentially. Margaret's co-workers began placing regular orders. She managed to get the sweets into 2 small cafes in her neighborhood. In less than 3 months, Sarah was producing more sweets for New York than for Stonebridge. "Mom, are we getting rich now?" Emma Grace asked again. "Not rich, my dear, but we are managing to save a little money for the future." "And will we be able to go to New York for vacation?" "We will, and we'll stay a whole week there." The prospect of the trip to New York left the children thrilled. They spent weeks planning what they would do, what gifts they would bring for their friends, and which places they would like to see in the big city. When the school holidays arrived, the whole family went down the mountain for the first time since they had moved there. Robert offered to take them to the bus station in his truck. "Take good care in New York," he said. "The big city can be dangerous for those used to the tranquility of the countryside." "We'll be careful, Mr. Robert. And thank you for looking after the house while we're away. It's the least I can do." The bus trip was an adventure for the children. Daniel was fascinated watching the cities pass by the window. Emma Grace slept almost the entire way, hugging her doll, Olivia. Emily helped Sarah take care of Tommy, who was restless with so much novelty. Margaret was waiting for them at the New York bus station with her 4 children. The reunion was emotional. The children hugged each other as if they were sisters who hadn't seen each other for years. Margaret's house in New York was small but cozy. It was in a simple but tidy neighborhood, with tree-lined streets and constant movement of people. For Sarah's children, accustomed to the mountain's silence, the constant noise of the city was an initial shock. "It never stops being noisy here," Emily observed on the first night. "It's different from our house, huh?" said Daniel. "I like the noise," said Emma Grace. "It feels like someone's always awake." During the week in New York, Sarah had the chance to see the places where Margaret sold her sweets. It was surprising to see how the products she made in her mountain home kitchen were received with enthusiasm by New Yorkers. "Your sweets are a big hit here," said Margaret as they visited one of the snack shops. "People say they taste like childhood, like Grandma's house. It's funny how food can stir up feelings, isn't it?" "Yeah. I think that's why the business is doing well. You're not just selling sweets, you're selling emotional memory." Sarah had never thought of her work that way, but it made sense. The sweets she made followed traditional recipes, the kind grandmothers made for their grandchildren. During the stay in New York, the families talked about the possibility of expanding the business even further. Margaret had received offers from other snack shops and even from a small supermarket to sell the sweets. "What do you think?" asked Margaret. "Would you be up for increasing production? I don't know if I could manage alone. I'm already at my limit. What if we set up a small factory here in New York? You could teach me the recipes, and I would produce them here." The offer was tempting but also scary. It would mean a complete change in the business, and Sarah didn't know if she was ready for that. "I need to think it over carefully. It's a very important decision. Of course, no rush, but know the opportunity is there if you want to take it." On the last night in New York, the two families had a special dinner. The children had formed even stronger bonds during that week. Christopher and Matthew taught Daniel and Emily how to play soccer at a neighborhood court. Olivia and Emma Grace became inseparable, making plans to write to each other regularly. Even Tommy and Benjamin, despite the age difference, played together like little brothers. "I don't want to leave," whined Emma Grace. "Me neither," said Daniel. "There's so much to do here." "But our home is up on the mountain," said Emily wisely. "That's where our peace comes from." On the trip back, Sarah thought a lot about Margaret's proposal. Expanding the business to New York would be an incredible financial opportunity, but it would also mean giving up direct control over the quality of the products, and it might mean moving to New York, leaving behind the mountain house that had become her home. "What do you all think?" she asked the children during the trip. "Would you like to live in New York?" "I don't know," said Emily. "It's cool to visit, but to live, our house is nicer." "I liked the hustle and bustle," said Daniel. "But I also like our porch seeing the valley down below." "I want to stay wherever Mom stays," said Emma Grace diplomatically. Sarah smiled. The children were wise in their own way. They had enjoyed the urban experience, but they recognized the value of the life they had on the mountain. When they returned home, Sarah had a surprise. Robert had not only looked after the house, but had also made some small improvements. He fixed a loose board on the porch, painted the backyard fence, and had even planted some flowers in the garden. "Mr. Robert, you didn't have to do all this. I wanted to. The house was a bit neglected while you were away, and I took advantage of having some free time." "How much were the materials? I'll reimburse you." "I won't accept a cent. It was a pleasure to look after your house." That night, back on her favorite porch, looking at the valley lit by the moon, Sarah made a decision about Margaret's proposal. She would write to her declining the expansion of the business to New York, but suggesting they keep the partnership at its current level. "Dear Margaret, the trip was wonderful, and we are very grateful for your hospitality. The children won't stop talking about the days we spent with you. Regarding the business expansion proposal, I thought a lot about it and decided I prefer to keep things as they are. It's not that I don't trust you to make the sweets. On the contrary, I know you would do an excellent job. But I realized I like being directly involved in every step of the production. Besides, I discovered that our life in the mountains is exactly what we needed. The children are happy, the house has become our true home, and the business at its current size gives us stability without compromising our quality of life. I hope you understand, and that we can continue our partnership as it is. Perhaps in the future, when the children are older, I'll reconsider expansion. For now, I'm happy being a mountain confectioner who has a small slice of the New York market. With affection and gratitude, Sarah." Margaret's reply arrived a week later and was completely understanding. "Dear Sarah, I perfectly understand and respect your decision. You are right to prioritize the family's happiness. Our current business is already great, and there's no need to force an expansion if it doesn't bring more quality of life. Keep being our mountain confectioner. Here in New York, your sweets are known as the Mountain Sweets, and that has become a unique selling point. People like knowing they come from a special place. The quality of life you have there is a treasure. Preserve it. With affection, Margaret." The following months were a time of consolidation. The sweets business was stable and profitable. The children had grown and matured, each developing their own personality and talents. Emily had become an excellent cook, helping Sarah not only with the sweets, but with all the family meals. Daniel discovered a talent for drawing and began illustrating the sweet packaging, giving the products a special artistic touch. Emma Grace became the family's little salesperson, winning over customers with her smile and friendliness. And Tommy, now almost 2 years old, was the joy of the house, running around the porch and filling the place with his laughter. The house on the edge of the cliff was no longer a scary or mysterious place. It was a home full of life, work, and love. The wooden porch that once seemed dangerous was now the family's favorite spot to watch the sunrise and sunset over the valley. It was on a Sunday afternoon, almost 2 years after they had moved to the mountain, that Sarah received an unexpected visit. Elizabeth Rodriguez appeared again, but this time she was not alone. She brought with her an elderly man with white hair and a middle-aged woman. "Sarah, these are my parents," said Elizabeth with an emotional smile. "Richard and Dorothy Rodriguez." Sarah was surprised. They were the parents of the family in the photo she had found in the trunk, the couple who had lost the house in a bet decades ago. "What a surprise," said Sarah. "You are very welcome." Richard, the man who had bet and lost the house, looked at the property with a mixture of nostalgia and emotion. His eyes were full of tears. "The house is exactly the same," he murmured, as if time hadn't passed. Dorothy, his wife, watched the children playing in the yard with a gentle smile. "It's so good to see happy children here again," she said. "This house was born to have a family." "Please come in," invited Sarah. "Let's talk properly." In the living room, the elderly couple looked at every detail with recognition. It was clear that this place held very important memories for them. "I hope you don't mind us being here," said Richard. "I know I no longer have any rights to this house." "Of course I don't mind," replied Sarah. "This will always be the house you built with love. You're always welcome whenever you'd like. Thank you for your kindness." During the afternoon, Benjamin shared more details about the family's history, how he had built the house with his own hands, brick by brick, board by board, how he had chosen that specific spot because the view made him feel he could see the whole world. "Why did you choose to build so close to the edge of the cliff?" asked Daniel, curious. "Because I wanted my children to grow up without a fear of heights," replied Benjamin. "I wanted them to learn to look down without dizziness and up without limits." "And did it work?" "It did. They all became brave people willing to face challenges," Dorothy added. "And also because the view from here is the most beautiful in the region. From this balcony we see the sun rise on one mountain and set on another. It's as if we lived between the beginning and the end of the world." "Why did you never come back?" asked Emily. Benjamin lowered his head. "Shame, my dear. Ashamed of having lost in one night what I had built over years. Ashamed of having destroyed my family's stability because of a stupid addiction." "But did you recover from the addiction?" "I did, yes. Losing this house was such a shock that I never touched a deck of cards or a gaming table again. But the damage was already done." Sarah felt compassion for the man. It was clear he had carried this burden for decades. "Mr. Benjamin, may I offer an opinion?" "Of course. You didn't destroy anything. On the contrary, you built something that continues to bring happiness to families. This house passed through the Harrisons, now it's with us, and every family that has lived here has found love." "You are very kind." "It's not kindness. It's the truth. Look around. Your work is still alive, still fulfilling the purpose for which it was built." Elizabeth watched the conversation with emotion. It was clear this reunion with the house was therapeutic for her parents. "Dad," she said, "how about you tell Sarah about the house's secret?" "What secret?" asked Sarah, intrigued. Benjamin smiled for the first time since he had arrived. "When I built this house, I included some, let's say, special features." "What kind of features?" "For example, there's a secret compartment in the living room wall where we used to keep important documents." "Where?" Benjamin stood up and went to a wall that looked completely normal. He pressed a specific spot, and a small section of the wall opened like a little door. "Wow!" exclaimed the children in unison. "And there's more," continued Benjamin. "In the kitchen, there's a secret pantry behind the refrigerator." He showed how to move the refrigerator slightly to reveal a storage space Sarah had never noticed. "And my favorite," he said with a twinkle in his eye, "is the observatory." "Observatory?" "In the attic. There's a hidden staircase in the master bedroom that leads up. From there you can see the entire region, day and night." Sarah was impressed. She had lived in the house for almost 2 years and had never discovered these special features. Why did you make all these secret spaces? When you have 4 small children, you always need places to keep things away from curious little hands, laughed Benjamin. And also because I always thought a house should have its surprises. The children were thrilled with the discoveries. They ran to explore each secret space, making plans about how they would use each one. Can I use the living room compartment to keep my special drawings? Asked Daniel. And can I use the secret pantry for birthday surprises? Wanted to know Emma Grace. You can use them for whatever you want, said Benjamin. The house is yours now. At the end of the afternoon, as the Rodriguez family prepared to leave, Benjamin had a private conversation with Sarah. Mrs. Sarah, I want to thank you. Thank me for what? For taking such good care of this house, for turning it back into a home full of love. Seeing you here today, I've finally made peace with what happened in the past. We are the ones who thank you for building such a special house. And I promise I'll come back to visit if you'll allow it. Not as the owner, but as, let's say, an honorary grandfather. It's beautiful to see children growing up where my children grew up. You will always be welcome. After the Rodriguez family's departure, Sarah and the children explored all the secret spaces of the house. It was as if they had gained a new house within the old one. In the attic observatory, the view was even more spectacular than from the porch. From there they could see not only the valley, but also the mountains in the distance, the river snaking through the plain, and at night, the lights of neighboring towns. "Mum," said Emily, looking at the view from the observatory, "now I understand why Mr. Richard chose this place to build the house." "Why?" "Because from here, you really can see the whole world. And when you can see that far, problems seem small." Sarah hugged her daughter. At just 12 years old, Emily already showed a wisdom that impressed her. "You're right, my dear. Perspective changes everything." That night, for the first time in almost 2 years, Sarah wondered if she should tell the children the whole story of the house. The truth about how Robert had won the property in a bet, how he had blamed himself for it, and how he had offered them the house out of a mix of generosity and a need for redemption. She decided yes, they were old enough to understand, and they deserved to know the complete history of the place where they lived. During dinner the next day, Sarah told them everything. She started with the Rodriguez family, and how they lost the house, went through the period of the Harrisons, and finished by explaining how they had ended up there. The children listened to everything in silence, processing the information. "So, Mr. Robert gave us this house because he felt guilty?" asked Daniel. "In part, yes, but also because he genuinely wanted to help." "And does that change anything?" asked Emily. "Why would it change?" "I don't know. I was wondering if we should feel bad about being in a house we didn't buy." Sarah thought carefully before answering. "Emily, what do you think makes a house ours? The fact that we bought it, or the fact that we turn it into a home?" "The fact of turning it into a home," said Emma Grace without hesitation. "And do you think we've turned this house into a home?" "Of course," they all answered in chorus. "Then it is ours. The rest is just paperwork." "And what if one day Mr. Robert changes his mind and wants the house back?" asked Daniel, ever practical. "He won't. He's told me many times he was happy to see the house full of life again, and besides, the deed is in my name. Legally, the house is ours. So we don't need to worry?" "We don't. We can continue living our lives here peacefully." The conversation resolved the children's doubts and solidified the sense of belonging they already felt toward the house. In the months that followed, life continued at its quiet and productive pace. The candy business was stable, the children grew healthy and happy, and the house became more and more established as a true home. It was during the 3rd year of living on the mountain that something happened which would test the stability they had built. Robert appeared one afternoon with a worried expression on his face. "Mrs. Sarah, I need to speak with you about something important." "What happened, Mr. Robert?" "A man has arrived in town claiming to be the son of Richard Rodriguez, and that he has a right to this house." Sarah felt the world spin. After 3 years of peace and stability, an issue had arisen that could put everything at risk. the son of Richard Rodriguez? But Elizabeth never mentioned having a brother. It seems this man is from another relationship, from before Richard got married. He showed up with documents saying his father never had the right to bet this house because it should have passed to him as an inheritance. Is that possible? I don't know. The man brought a lawyer and is threatening a lawsuit. He says the bet was illegal because the house didn't fully belong to Richard. Sarah sat in a chair trying to process the information. After 3 years building a stable life, the possibility of losing everything had emerged. What kind of documents did he present? Birth certificate, some papers he claims prove he was the rightful heir. But it could all be forged. His lawyer wants to schedule a meeting with me and you. And what do you think we should do? First, consult our own lawyer. Second, talk to Elizabeth to see if she knows anything about this supposed brother. That night, Sarah could barely sleep. The possibility of losing the house was terrifying, not just for the practical matter of where they would live, but because that place had truly become the family's home. The next day, she went down to town to use the public phone and call Elizabeth in Denver. The conversation was enlightening. Elizabeth, Mr. Robert told me a man showed up claiming to be your brother and questioning the ownership of the house. Oh no, sighed Elizabeth on the other end of the line. I was afraid this might happen one day. So he really is your brother? Yes, he is. Christopher Rodriguez, my father's son with another woman before he married my mother. But he abandoned that child when he was a baby and never officially acknowledged him. And now he wants inheritance rights. Apparently, yes. Christopher showed up a few times during our childhood, always wanting money or causing trouble. My father tried to help him a few times, but Christopher always wasted everything on drink and gambling. Does he have a legal right to the house? I don't know. He was never officially recognized as a son, but he might have gotten some forged document or found a legal loophole. What do you think we should do? Sarah, I'll be honest with you. I know Christopher and how he operates. He doesn't want the house to live in. He wants money. If he can prove he has a right to the property, he'll sell it immediately to the highest bidder. The information was like a punch to Sarah's stomach. The prospect of losing the house was already bad. Knowing it could end up in the hands of someone who only wanted profit was even worse. Elizabeth, could you come here? I think it would be important for you to be present at the meeting with the lawyers. Yes, I can. In fact, I was thinking of doing just that. Christopher can't go around disturbing innocent families because of his greed. Elizabeth arrived in Stonebridge at the end of the week, bringing her own documents and lawyer. The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday at Robert's house. During the week, Sarah tried to maintain normality for the children, but it was impossible to completely hide her worry. Emily, always observant, noticed something was wrong. Mom, are you worried about something? Sarah decided to be honest, but in a way suitable for the children's ages. A problem has come up about the ownership of our house, but we're handling it. I don't want you to worry. Could we lose the house? Asked Daniel, getting straight to the point. It's a possibility. But we're going to fight so that doesn't happen. And if we lose, where will we live? If that happens, we'll figure something out. The important thing is that we're together. The children were visibly worried but tried not to show it. Sarah noticed they started helping more than usual, as if they wanted to prove how much that house meant to them. On the Saturday of the meeting, Sarah left the children with James, the gardener, and went down to town. The meeting would be in Robert's office with Elizabeth present, the lawyers for both parties, and Christopher Rodriguez. When Christopher arrived, Sarah was shocked. He was clearly Elizabeth's brother, with features very similar to the elderly Richard she had met, but there was something in his eyes that revealed greed and opportunism. "So, you're the woman living in my house," said Christopher without greeting her. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, and the house isn't yours, it's mine." "We'll see about that." Christopher's lawyer presented documents that at first glance seemed to prove that Richard had acknowledged Christopher as his son a few years before his death. According to them, this would give Christopher the right to half the inheritance, including the house. But Elizabeth's lawyer immediately countered, "These documents are very recent in date. My client is claiming they were forged." "Prove it," said Christopher's lawyer. "We will prove it." The meeting lasted 3 hours with technical arguments about documentation, inheritance rights, the validity of affidavits, and a series of complex legal issues. In the end, it was decided that a court proceeding would be necessary to resolve the matter. "How long could that take?" Sarah asked Elizabeth's lawyer. "A few months, perhaps a year. It depends on the complexity of the document investigation." "And in the meantime, can I continue living in the house?" "You can. You have the deed registered in your name, so the current possession is yours. He would have to prove in court that he has a right to the property." Sarah felt a little more at ease, but she knew it would be a period of uncertainty. When she returned home and told the children the outcome of the meeting, they reacted in different ways. "So we have to wait for the court to decide?" asked Emily. "Yes. And if it decides the house is his, then we'll have to leave." "But that's unfair," exploded Daniel. "We turned this house into a home. We took care of it, renovated it, made it beautiful." "I know, son, but sometimes life isn't fair." Emma Grace, who had remained quiet during the conversation, finally spoke up. "Mom, if we have to leave, can we take the Mariana doll?" The question, in its innocence, touched Sarah deeply. Emma Grace was worried about maintaining a connection to the house through the object that symbolized her link to the families who had lived there before. "Of course, my dear, Mariana is yours." That night, Sarah stayed awake on the porch, looking at the valley and thinking about all the twists and turns her life had taken. 3 years ago, she was a desperate widow with no place to live. Now she was a successful businesswoman, mother of 4 happy children living in a house they loved, and all of that could disappear because of the greed of a man who had never shown any interest in the property before. But she also reflected on her strength. 3 years ago, a situation like this would have left her utterly desperate. Now, although worried, she knew she had resources, both financial and emotional, to face any challenge. If they had to leave, they could buy or rent another house. The candy business was thriving and would support the family no matter where they lived. The children had become resilient and would adapt to a new situation if necessary. But Sarah was also determined to fight. That house meant much more than just a place to live. It was the symbol of the family's recovery, of the fresh start after widowhood, the proof that it was possible to rebuild a life after a great loss. On Monday, she did something that surprised even herself. She called Margaret in New York and asked for a favor. "Margaret, I need a very big favor. Whatever you need, Sarah, tell me. I need you to lend me money to hire a very good lawyer. I'm facing a serious issue about the ownership of the house. How much do you need?" "I don't know yet, but it could be a considerable amount." "Sarah, you don't need to borrow from me. We are partners in the sweets business, and that business has been generating profit for me too. I'll cover the costs of your lawyer as an investment in our partnership." "Margaret, I can't accept that." "Yes, you can. And you know why? Because if you lose that house, you might have to move to New York, and then our business will change completely. Investing in your stability in Stonebridge is investing in our business." Margaret's solidarity deeply moved Sarah. In just 3 years, the friendship between them had become one of the most important things in her life. With financial resources secured, Sarah could hire one of the best law firms in the region. The lawyer, Dr. William Mitchell, was a specialist in inheritance and rural property matters. After analyzing all the case documents, Dr. William was optimistic. "The documents that Christopher presented are clearly forged. We have several pieces of evidence of this. It is most likely that the case will be resolved in our favor." "How long could it take?" "If all goes well, 3 to 4 months. The problem is if he appeals the decision. Then it could drag on for a year or 2. "And is there a risk of me losing the house during this time?" "Very low. Since you have the deed registered in your name, and there is evidence of forgery in his documents, the tendency is for the court to maintain the status quo until the final decision." The information reassured Sarah, but she knew it would still be a period of tension. During the following months, the family's life continued normally, but with a cloud of uncertainty hanging over everything. The children adapted to the situation with the typical resilience of their age, but Sarah noticed they were more attached to the house than ever. Daniel started photographing every corner of the property with an old camera that Robert gave him. When asked why he was doing this, he replied, "To have memories, in case we have to leave." Emily started writing a diary about life in the house, recording every small daily event. Emma Grace intensified her care for the doll Olivia and the plants in the garden, as if she wanted to preserve everything she loved about that place. The legal proceedings went as predicted by Dr. William. Christopher's documents were examined and conclusively declared to be crude forgeries. In 4 months, the first instance ruled in Sarah's favor, confirming her ownership of the property. Christopher, as expected, appealed the decision, but his appeal was so poorly substantiated that the second instance court didn't even accept to review the case. In 6 months, the entire legal matter was definitively resolved. "It's over," said Dr. William in a call to Sarah. "The house is officially and definitively yours. Christopher can no longer challenge it." Sarah sat in the chair at the law office and began to cry. Not from sadness, but from relief. 6 months of tension had finally come to an end. When she arrived home with the news, the children's reaction was explosive. They ran through the house shouting with joy, hugged Sarah, hugged each other, and even began planning improvements for the property. "Now I can finish my photo album of the house," said Daniel. "And I can plant more flowers in the garden," said Emma Grace. "And we can use the observatory to study astronomy," added Emily. That night the whole family went up to the attic observatory to celebrate. From there, looking at the stars over the valley, Sarah reflected on everything they had been through. 3.5 years ago, she was a desperate widow who had accepted a strange house in a dangerous location as a last resort. Now she was the legal and permanent owner of a house she loved, mother to 4 thriving and happy children, a partner in a successful business, and a respected member of the Stoneridge community. "You know what we're going to do to celebrate?" she said to the children. "What?" they asked in chorus. "We're going to throw the biggest party this house has ever seen, and we're going to invite everyone who has been part of our story. Mr. Robert, Margaret and the children, Elizabeth and her parents, Mr. George, the neighbors from town, and we'll make a table full of our sweets," added Emma Grace. "That's right. We'll show everyone how this house truly became our home." The party was scheduled for the following month to allow time to organize everyone's arrival. Sarah insisted on personally cooking all the specialties she had developed over the years. Margaret came from New York with her 4 children. Elizabeth brought her elderly parents. Robert invited several townspeople. George helped decorate the garden. The house that once seemed too big and empty for a family was now packed with happy people. The balcony over the cliff, which once caused fear, was now the place where everyone gathered to admire the sunset. During the party, Sarah had the opportunity to speak individually with each person who had been important on her journey. Robert, now with completely white hair but still vigorous, expressed his satisfaction with how things had turned out. "Mrs. Sarah, seeing this party, seeing how you've transformed this house into a true celebration of life, I can say I've finally made peace with everything that happened in the past. You saved my family, Mr. Robert. I'll never forget that." "No, Ma'am. The one who saved it was you, with your strength, determination, and ability to turn difficulties into opportunities." Margaret, watching the 2 families of children playing together in the backyard, commented on how their friendship had enriched everyone's lives. "Sarah, when we decided to partner in the sweets business, I never imagined I'd gain a sister." "Neither did I. Sometimes the best things in life come disguised as business opportunities." Elizabeth, accompanied by her elderly parents, thanked Sarah for how she had cared for the house they built with so much love. "Dad," Elizabeth said to Richard, "what do you think of seeing the house like this, full of life and happiness?" "I think it has finally fulfilled its purpose," replied the elderly man. "A house only makes sense when it's home to a happy family." George, the gardener who had become practically an adoptive grandfather to the children, watched Daniel showing his photographs to the other boys. "That boy has a photographer's eye," he commented. "He can see beauty in things others don't even notice." "He wants to be a photographer when he grows up," said Sarah. "He'll be a good photographer. He has the sensitivity to see what matters." When night fell and the last guests had left, the family gathered again in the observatory. The valley was dotted with lights from the houses in the area, creating an almost magical scene. "Mom," said Emily, now 14 and clearly the most thoughtful of the children, "do you regret accepting this house?" "Never." "Why do you ask?" Because it was so hard at the beginning, you were worried, we didn't really understand what was happening. Everything seemed uncertain. Sarah thought carefully before answering. Emily, the best things in life often come disguised as problems. When I accepted this house, I was desperate, but that desperate situation forced me to discover strengths I didn't even know I had. What kind of strengths? Courage to start over, creativity to invent ways to make money, the ability to make true friends, determination to fight for what is ours. Daniel, now 12, added, and we learned that a house isn't just a place where we sleep, it's a place where we build memories. Emma Grace, 10 years old, added her perspective, and I learned that it doesn't matter where we live. What's important is being together. Tommy, now almost 4 and speaking perfectly, had the final word. I like our house because from here we can see everything. Sarah hugged her 4 children, looking once more at the valley illuminated by the stars. The house on the edge of the cliff had become much more than a shelter. It was the symbol of their ability to overcome adversity, the center of a network of deep friendships, the place where 4 children were growing up happy and safe. Do you know what I'm going to do tomorrow? She said. What? Asked the children. I'm going to write a letter to myself, telling our whole story since we arrived here, and I'm going to keep it in the secret compartment in the living room. Why? So that one day, when you're adults and bring your children to see the house where you grew up, you can read about our journey. And also so that if one day other people live here, they'll know this house has a story of struggle, overcoming, and lots of love, Emily added. Exactly. That night, Sarah wrote a long letter, starting from the moment Robert offered the house up to the party they had just held. She told of the initial fears, the discoveries about the previous families, the growth of the candy business, the friendship with Margaret, the legal process, and finally, the consolidation of that place as the family's true home. She ended the letter with a reflection that summed up her journey. To whoever finds this letter one day, this house was built with love by Mr. Richard Rodriguez, passed through the hands of several families, and has always been a place of new beginnings. If you are living here, you've probably been through some difficulty, just as we did. I want you to know that there is no problem that cannot be overcome with determination, hard work, and openness to accepting help and offering friendship. This house has good energy, a spectacular view, and secret spaces that will delight your children. But most importantly, it has the potential to become a true home for any family that receives it with an open heart. Take care of it with affection, as we did, and it will take care of you in return. With love and gratitude for the journey, Sarah Mitchell and Children, 1978. The next day, she placed the letter in the secret compartment in the living room, along with some photos from the party and drawings the children had made over the years. The years that followed were of consolidation and gradual growth. The candy business expanded to other towns in the region. Daniel developed his photographic talent and began selling his photos of the mountain landscape to tourists. Emily became Sarah's official assistant in managing the business. Emma Grace discovered a talent for working with plants and transformed the house's garden into a true botanical paradise. The house on the edge of the cliff became a landmark in the region. People came from far away to buy the famous candies from the mountain confectioner and to admire the spectacular view of the valley. Some tourists asked to take photos on the balcony over the abyss, impressed by the courage of those who had chosen to live there. Sarah never again questioned her decision to accept that strange house offered by Robert. On the contrary, as the years passed, she understood more and more that it had not been a desperate situation, but a disguised opportunity. The woman who had once accepted a house on the edge of a cliff as a last resort had discovered that sometimes you need to be at the limit to find your true strength. The cliff that seemed to represent danger revealed itself as a metaphor for life. You need courage to look down and to look up, as Richard Rodriguez had said, to grow without fear of heights or depths. And the secret the house hid was no supernatural mystery or buried treasure. The true secret was its ability to transform uprooted families into strengthened families, to offer not just shelter, but perspective, literally and metaphorically. Years later, When the children had grown and gone their own ways, Sarah remained in the house. Daniel became a recognized professional photographer, but he always returned to the mountain to capture the landscape that shaped his artistic eye. Emily fully took over the candy business and expanded it into a small industry that employed several people from the region. Emma Grace graduated in agronomy and transformed the property into an example of rural sustainability. Tommy pursued an academic career, but he always spent his holidays at the mountain house. When Sarah turned 60, the children organized a surprise party at the house. They invited again all the people who had been part of the family's journey. Robert, now very old, was still present. Margaret brought her grandchildren to see the house that had so much influence on their grandmother's life. Elizabeth came with her expanded family. During this party, Daniel revealed a special project he had been developing, a photography book telling the story of the house through images captured over 2 decades. The photos showed the evolution of the property, the children's growth, the transformations of the garden, the different seasons viewed from the porch, and most of all, the genuine happiness of a family that had found its place in the world. "Mom," said Daniel during the party speech, "this book is a tribute not just to our house but to your courage. You taught us that above fear is faith, and above faith is action." Emily added, "And you taught us that a home isn't made with walls, but with love, work, and persistence." Emma Grace added, "You taught us to see beauty where others see danger, opportunity where others see a problem." Tommy, now an engineering graduate, finished, "And you taught us that sometimes the best views in life are only possible when we have the courage to live on the edge of the cliff." Sarah, moved, looked around the porch full of loved ones, then looked at the valley she knew by heart after so many years, and finally looked at the 4 children she had raised in that unlikely place. "You know what I learned living here," she said, "that life always offers second chances to those with the courage to accept them, that the generosity of good people can completely change a family's destiny, and that there is no place too dangerous when it's inhabited by people who love each other." She paused and smiled. "And I learned that accepting a house on the edge of a cliff was the best decision of my life, because it taught me that sometimes you need to live on the edge to discover we are stronger than we imagine." The secret the house had hidden was now fully revealed. It was not a mystery to be solved, but a lesson to be lived. The real treasure wasn't buried in the backyard, but had been built day after day through work, love, friendship, and perseverance. The house on the edge of the cliff, which once seemed a desperate last resort, had revealed itself as the first chapter of a new life full of possibilities, achievements, and, most of all, genuine happiness. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you follow us from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Sarah made the right decision by accepting the house? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories.